Greetings to all of my friends in Germany. I regret that my German isn't really good enough for me to risk greeting you in German throughout the film, but I hope that it will be comprehensible to all the German audience as well, and that the lessons I try to teach from my own experiences in Germany during the war and before will be clear from this excellent film by Ulrich Horn, and I hope you all enjoy it and learn something from it. Thank you very much for your attention. The Nuremberg trials took place about 70 years ago. The International Military Tribunal, which involved the four powers, was well known and well publicized. It was the trial against Goering and company, and that was followed by 12 subsequent trials, which are less well known, because we felt that in order to get a clear picture of how it was possible for a civilized and educated country like Germany to tolerate the terrible crimes committed under the Nazi regime. And we felt we should have trials against the doctors for medical experiments, against lawyers and judges who perverted the law, and others. The significance today is even more important than it was at that time, because our capacity to kill in times of war has increased incredibly. We now have the capacity to kill every living thing on this planet if we get into a hostile war. Nuremberg tried to teach us that war was the supreme international crime, and we must move toward a more peaceful way of settling our differences. And therein lies its significance, but we must carry out its promise, and we are not yet fully there. Good luck to you. Nuremberg was a great historical event, but it was 70 years ago, and since then the world has changed in many ways. Our capacity to kill people has increased enormously. From cyberspace today, we can cut off the electrical grid on planet Earth. This imposes an obligation on us to take more seriously the lessons of Nuremberg, and we are doing that, but very slowly. We have finally created an international criminal court in The Hague to carry on what we tried to teach the rest of the world at Nuremberg, and which nations, including the United States, have often seemed to have forgotten. So it's important that we remember Nuremberg and the important lessons that war itself is a supreme international crime, that crime is committed by individuals, and they should be held to account in a court of law for their evil deeds. And it takes a determination on the part of everyone, because if the law is to apply equally to everyone, and it should, and it must, it will only then that we can begin to see a more peaceful world than we have today. My first awareness of Nazi atrocities came while I was still a student at the Harvard Law School around 1941 and 42. I was doing research for a professor, Sheldon Gluck, former German, on war crimes, and he was a member of the United Nations, had nothing to do with this United Nations, War Crimes Commission, which was a group of refugee lawyers in London who were collecting evidence of atrocities and crimes being committed and forwarding it to members of the commission, so that I had a pretty good indication of what was going on. My real awareness came not at Nuremberg, but before Nuremberg. As a soldier in General Patton's army, my assignment as a sergeant of infantry was to go into the concentration camps as they were being liberated. And so I began first in an out camp of Buchenwald, and then proceeded to Mauthausen, Flossenburg, and a whole host of camps, Ebensee. As we entered, and the Germans were fleeing, the SS was fleeing, the Americans were trying to chase them, the inmates were trying to catch them. There was total chaos inside the camps, dead bodies all over the floor, crematoria still going, bones lined up in front of the crematoria, skeletons, dead people, rats, diseases of all kinds in the camp. It was there that I really had to steel myself, strengthen myself, to be able to cope with these horrendous sights, human beings lying there and speaking to you only with their eyes, crying, "Help me." And I developed a trick, sort of, to cut it out and say it's not real. This must be a sort of a Hollywood set. And that capacity to pretend what I was looking at was not real was what enabled me to go about and do my job of getting the evidence of the crimes and find out the names of those who were responsible without going completely mad. Now, that has certainly left a traumatic impact on me, which I still feel today. So, although it didn't interfere with my work either as a prosecutor or as a war crimes investigator, it certainly made an indelible impression on me that I would not wish on anybody else to have to witness, because it's still hard to explain how it could come about. My greatest disappointment in Germany as a soldier, as a war crimes investigator, as a prosecutor, and even later when I was engaged in trying to find compensation for the surviving victims, was that those who were responsible for incredible crimes never once said they were sorry, including my defendants who had murdered thousands of people, including thousands of infants, shot one shot at a time or their heads smashed against trees. They never said, "We made a mistake, I regretted what we did, I was only forced to do it." They all pretended that they were forced to do it, which was not true at all. Nobody is forced in the German soldier's law to commit illegal acts, killing children, and say, "Well, we're forced to do it." They knew they were committing terrible crimes, and they did it usually with great enthusiasm. They boasted about how many they killed. They increased the number. This is proof there is no remorse whatsoever. And that is very unfortunate, because they see the results, or they have seen the results of what happens when they forget their humanity and fail to recognize that we are all human beings entitled to live in peace and human dignity, regardless of their race or creed. And that was my plea to the court in Nuremberg when I asked them to accept a plea of humanity to law to create a more peaceful world. And that's still my view today. For many years, I did whatever I could to carry on the Nuremberg tradition by creating a new international criminal court. Once the international military trial against Goering and company was over, that was the end. There had never been an international military court before, and there was none other. So it took a long time to build what became the International Criminal Court that does exist in The Hague today. Germany played a key role in that. Hans-Peter Kaul, who was your representative, unfortunately he died not too long ago, was a leader in the debates dealing with the International Criminal Court, and he finally became a judge on the International Court when it was created. I could say we were good friends, in fact. And it's a new German generation which has recognized that the evils of the past generation, or the willingness to just follow orders from their government, is a road to disaster. If we are to do anything constructive in the world, and surely Germany now is the leader in the European Union as well, I hope the French will pardon my saying so, Germany will have a key role to play, and it's up to the young people. And I must say also, thank you to the German government when they gave me their Verdienstkreuz Erste Klasse. as a symbol from their side that even though I was largely responsible for obtaining compensation for Nazi victims, Jews and non-Jews alike, and for hanging some of their leading mass murderers, the new generation wanted to say thank you, and I appreciated their effort, and it was a clear signal that the Nazi days, I hope, are over forever, and I thank the new German generation for moving in that direction. One of the more difficult legal obstacles in creating an international criminal court to stop war making has been the refusal of many powerful states to accept the idea that any independent international court could judge the validity of their use of armed force to protect their national interests. And so they have come up with the argument, well, we have not defined the crime. Until you define the crime, of course, you cannot try the criminal. It would be unfair. That is a phony argument, absolutely. When Justice Jackson, supported by the French and the British and the Russians, accused people of the crime of aggression, they were not inventing a new crime. They were inventing what the defendants knew very well were the deeds that they did to bring Germany into the war and to attack all of their neighbors. And they have failed for 70 years since the matter first was debated by the first General Assembly of the United Nations, saying we need an international criminal court to carry out from Nuremberg, we need a code of crimes, and of course we have to define aggression. So somebody said it wasn't defined, but it was defined. It was defined repeatedly, but they used that as an excuse. And they do to this very day. I'm speaking to you in November 2015. To this very day, nations led by the United States, I'm very sorry to say, but followed very closely by the Russians and by the Chinese, say, look, we cannot try people for aggression because it hasn't been defined. My answer to that was, let's not call it a crime of aggression. Let's give the baby a new name. Let's call it a better name, which defines it more accurately. The illegal use of armed force is a crime against humanity. What is illegal? Illegal is not in self-defense, and it's not approved by the Security Council of the United Nations. This is in the United Nations Charter. This is what binds all nations and should bind all individuals. So by calling it a crime against humanity and recognizing that the illegal use of armed force, when you know in advance that it will kill large numbers of innocent civilians, is a crime against all of humankind. And it also should be punishable under universal principles of jurisdiction, entitling any court in the world at any time to apprehend the perpetrator and bring him to justice in a court of law. That's what we're trying to do. It's difficult because of the political block which has been thrown in, preventing some of the powerful states from putting their full weight behind this objective. For thousands of years, military conquest was hailed as the way for power and glory. That has to change. The world has changed. Leaders today, if they're unable to agree, they still send their young people out to kill other young people they don't even know, who may have never done them any harm. And after they get tired of killing each other, they pause, each one declares victory, and then they start again. That is the current system. That is a madness, an absolute madness. So we must make it clear, no matter what the crime is called, whether it be called aggression or a crime against humanity or whatever they want to call it, it's a crime against all of humankind, and it should be condemned by every legal means possible, and that there will be no place for the perpetrators to hide. That is what we're trying to do, and hopefully Germany will play a key role in continuing that effort. Since I am now in my 96th year, I recognize that I will have to give up this fight fairly soon. But I know there will be many people who will pick up this banner. Included among them, I hope and expect, will be my son, Donald, who has also studied international law and written and published on the subject, and who has been working with me now for perhaps 20 years, trying to persuade other organizations and other people to follow the line toward a more humane world. So I'm hopeful that he will be able to carry on for many years. And among the many students I lecture to still all around the world, I find a remarkably enthusiastic response, even among the military. When I lectured at the Air Force Academy and at the West Point, I tell the cadets that the reason I'm there is I don't like to see them coming home in body bags, and I don't like to see them coming home in parts, and I don't know of any better way to prevent that. And they're in the first line of victims. And if there is any better way, I'll accept it right away. So I encourage them to think along similar lines, and I get standing ovations. That tells me something. It's not that the United States is not following the path to world peace. It's a small conservative clique in the United States which is able to wield sufficient political power to block a more democratic and a more liberal point of view. But that too will change. And as I see that happening, I have faith that younger people will carry this flag to victory. I am often asked whether I am optimistic or pessimistic about the state of the world and what we can do about it. The answer is that I am realistic. I see the problems very well about the International Criminal Court, for example, but I also see the progress. The progress has been fantastic. There has been a slow awakening of the human conscience. When I went to school, there was no such thing as human rights law, humanitarian law. There was no such thing as women holding key positions. All of that has changed. The American Constitution, which was a great constitution, women couldn't own property, they couldn't vote. Today, they're candidating for president. In Germany, we have a female chancellor. So we've seen that kind of changes, as well as people landing on the moon, being able to kill people from cyberspace. All of that has changed, and we have got to change our way of thinking as well. But as you see these changes taking place, and the recognition that we do have an obligation to care for refugees, we do have an obligation for the rich to help the poor, we do have an obligation not to contaminate the environment. All of these are human rights. We have meetings in the United Nations forever about more and more human rights. The United States Representative Samantha Power, who is our ambassador to the United Nations, is a well-known human rights person. When I see all of that, I know that we are moving in the right direction. What's very important is 3 pieces of advice I always give to students. 1, never give up. 2, never give up. 3, never give up. I hope you'll follow that advice. It will lead to a better world.